Why do we crave validation, and what does it really cost us? Think about it. How much of your day is spent seeking approval, whether it's through likes on a post, praise at work, or even just the need to feel accepted by those around you? Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These words cut straight to the heart of the Stoic philosophy, a way of thinking that has endured for centuries because it speaks to something timeless: the struggle between our inner peace and the endless pull of external validation. In a world that constantly tells us to measure our worth by how others see us, Stoicism offers a radically different approach. It teaches us to detach from the opinions of others, to cultivate self-awareness, and to build resilience that doesn't crumble under the weight of someone else's judgment. But here's the thing: this isn't just about ancient wisdom. It's about you right now. How much of your energy are you wasting chasing after validation that, in the end, doesn't truly satisfy? Today, we're going to explore how Stoics approach this universal human struggle and how you can apply their principles to break free from the need for approval. We'll dive into the power of detachment, the importance of self-awareness, and the quiet strength that comes from building resilience. By the end of this, you'll see why Stoics never chased after validation and why you shouldn't either. Let's get started. Validation is a mirage. It promises fulfillment but leaves us empty. Think about it. How often have you chased after praise, likes, or recognition, only to find that the satisfaction fades almost as quickly as it arrives? The Stoics understood this deeply. They saw external validation for what it truly is: fleeting, unreliable, and entirely outside of our control. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it plainly: what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. In other words, the approval or disapproval of others is just their judgment, a reflection of their own thoughts, not your worth. Now, consider something as simple as social media. You post a photo and the likes start rolling in. For a moment, it feels good, right? But what happens when the likes stop, or worse, when someone leaves a critical comment? Suddenly, that temporary high is replaced by doubt or frustration. This is the illusion of validation, a cycle that keeps us chasing something we can never truly grasp because it's not ours to hold in the first place. The Stoics would argue that tying your sense of worth to external approval is like building a house on sand. It might stand for a while, but it's bound to crumble under the weight of shifting opinions and circumstances. So, let me ask you this: when was the last time you felt truly satisfied by someone else's approval? And more importantly, how long did that feeling last? What if your worth wasn't tied to anyone else's opinion? This is the heart of Stoic philosophy when it comes to understanding self-worth. For the Stoics, true value isn't something external. It's not found in applause, compliments, or social status. It's rooted deeply within you, in your character, your choices, and your ability to live in alignment with your principles. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, put it this way: respect yourself and others will respect you. No one can give you dignity. It's something you must claim for yourself. This idea of self-sufficiency is central to Stoicism. It's not about isolating yourself or rejecting relationships. Instead, it's about recognizing that your worth doesn't depend on what others think of you. Imagine Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, sitting alone each night writing in his journal. He wasn't seeking validation from his empire or his advisors. He was reflecting on his own values, his actions, and whether he was living up to his ideals. He understood that his self-respect came from within, not from the approval of others. So how can we apply this today? One practical way is through journaling. Take a moment to write down what you truly value in yourself. not what others praise you for, but the qualities you believe make you a good person. Is it your honesty, your resilience, your ability to listen? These are the things that define your internal worth. Ask yourself, what qualities do I value most in myself, independent of others? By focusing on these, you begin to shift your sense of worth away from external validation and toward something more stable, more enduring. The Stoics remind us that seeking validation from others is like chasing shadows. It's fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying. But when you ground your worth in your own values and actions, you build a foundation that no one can shake, and that's where true freedom begins. What if you could be indifferent to praise and criticism alike? The Stoics believed that freedom from the opinions of others was one of the most powerful forms of liberation. They practiced something called cognitive distancing, a mental tool that allows you to step back from external judgments and see them for what they truly are, just opinions, not facts. When you detach from the need for validation, you reclaim control over your emotions and your sense of self-worth. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it this way: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, it's not the criticism or praise itself that affects you, it's your reaction to it. The Stoics didn't deny that people would judge them. They simply chose not to let those judgments dictate their inner state. By practicing this kind of detachment, they freed themselves from the emotional roller coaster of seeking approval or fearing disapproval. Let's bring this into a modern context. Imagine you're at work and a colleague criticizes your project. Your first instinct might be to feel defensive or even doubt your abilities. But what if, instead of reacting emotionally, you paused and asked yourself, is this feedback useful? Or is it just noise? By applying cognitive distancing, you can evaluate the criticism objectively, take what's helpful, and let go of the rest. This isn't about becoming indifferent to growth. It's about protecting your peace from unnecessary emotional turbulence. So, how would your life change if you stopped caring about others' opinions? Would you feel lighter, more focused, and more aligned with your true self? The Stoics remind us that our worth isn't determined by external validation. It's something we carry within. When you stop chasing after the approval of others, you create space to live authentically, guided by your own values rather than the fleeting judgments of those around you. Do you know why you seek validation in the first place? It's a question worth asking, because until you understand the root of that desire, it's hard to break free from it. The Stoics believed that self-awareness was the foundation of all wisdom, and for good reason. When you take the time to truly know yourself, you start to see the patterns in your thoughts and actions. You begin to recognize when you're chasing approval not because it serves you, but because it temporarily soothes an insecurity or fills a void. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look well into thyself, there is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." That source of strength, it's self-awareness. It's the ability to pause, reflect, and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What am I really seeking here? Let's make this practical. Start by identifying the moments when you feel that pull toward validation. Maybe it's when you post something on social media and find yourself anxiously checking for likes. Or perhaps it's in conversations where you catch yourself steering the discussion just to hear someone say, "You're right, these are your triggers." The Stoic approach here is simple but powerful. Observe without judgment. Don't beat yourself up for wanting approval. That's human nature. Instead, just notice it. Ask yourself, what's driving this? Is it fear of being overlooked, a need to feel important, or something else entirely? This kind of self-reflection isn't about finding quick fixes. It's about building a deeper understanding of yourself so you can make choices that align with your values, not your insecurities. So, take a moment to think, what situations make you crave approval and why? The more you uncover about your own motivations, the easier it becomes to let go of the need for external validation because you realize you already have what you're looking for within you. What if rejection didn't faze you? What if, instead of crumbling under the weight of someone's disapproval, you could stand firm, rooted in your own values? This is the kind of resilient Stoicism teaches, a resilience that doesn't depend on others' opinions but thrives on inner strength. At the heart of this philosophy is the idea that external judgments are beyond your control, but how you respond to them is entirely within your power. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most influential thinkers, once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." In other words, adversity isn't something to avoid, it's something to embrace because it's through challenges that we grow stronger. Take Cato the Younger, a Roman senator and Stoic who became legendary for his unwavering principles. When faced with political corruption and personal attacks, Cato refused to compromise his values, even when it cost him friendships and power. He didn't seek validation from others. Instead, he focused on living in alignment with his own moral code. His resilience wasn't about being unfeeling or indifferent. It was about prioritizing what truly mattered, his integrity. And that's the essence of Stoic resilience. It's not about ignoring criticism or rejection. It's about recognizing that these things don't define you. Now, think about how this applies in modern life. Imagine you've been rejected, whether it's a job application, a creative project, or even a relationship. The sting of that rejection can feel personal, but what if you could reframe it? Instead of seeing it as a reflection of your worth, what if you viewed it as an opportunity to reaffirm your own standards? Stoicism teaches us to ask, is this rejection within my control? Does it change who I am? The answer, of course, is no. Your value isn't determined by someone else's opinion. By focusing on what you can control, your effort, your intentions, your growth, you build the kind of resilience that can weather any storm. So, how can you strengthen your resilience in the face of criticism? Start by shifting your focus inward. Ask yourself, what are my values? What standards do I hold myself to? When you have a clear sense of your own principles, external judgments lose their power. Criticism becomes less about you and more about the person delivering it. And rejection, it becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. Resilience isn't about never feeling hurt, it's about knowing that your worth isn't tied to someone else's approval. That's the Stoic way, and it's a way anyone can learn, one step at a time. What if humility was the key to true confidence? For the Stoics, humility isn't about shrinking yourself or denying your worth. It's about recognizing that your value doesn't depend on external approval. The ego, on the other hand, thrives on validation. It constantly seeks praise, recognition, and attention, and in doing so, it becomes a barrier to inner peace. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it bluntly, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. In other words, don't let your ego tie your self-worth to how others perceive you. True confidence comes from within, not from the fleeting applause of others. Think about it. When you act boastful or overly self-promotional, what are you really seeking? Often, it's a way to fill a void, to prove something to yourself or others. But the Stoics would argue that this kind of behavior only keeps you trapped in a cycle of dependency. Instead, they advocate for humility, not as a weakness but as a strength. Humility allows you to detach from the need for validation and focus on what truly matters, your character, your actions, and your inner growth. Consider a practical example. Imagine you've just accomplished something significant. Let's say you finished a big project at work. The ego might urge you to shout about it, to make sure everyone knows how impressive you are. But what if instead you chose to simply acknowledge the achievement quietly without needing to broadcast it? This isn't about hiding your success. It's about understanding that your worth isn't determined by how loudly you announce it. The Stoic approach shifts the focus from external validation to internal fulfillment. So, how does your ego influence your need for validation? Take a moment to reflect on this. Are there areas in your life where you find yourself seeking approval or recognition more than you'd like? The Stoics remind us that when we let go of the ego's demands, we open ourselves to a deeper, more authentic kind of confidence, one that doesn't waver with the opinions of others. And that, perhaps, is the most empowering form of freedom. What if you stopped pretending to be someone you're not? The Stoics understood that true freedom comes from living authentically, not from seeking the approval of others. For them, integrity wasn't just a nice idea, it was a way of life. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This simple yet profound statement cuts to the heart of Stoic philosophy. Stop worrying about what others think you should be and focus on who you are. Think about it. How much of your daily life is spent trying to meet someone else's expectations? Whether it's at work, in social situations, or even online, we often wear masks to fit in or gain approval. But Stoics ask, what's the cost of that? Every time you suppress your true self to please others, you chip away at your own sense of worth. They believe that living authentically, being honest about your values, your desires, and your flaws, is the only way to live with real freedom and peace. Take a modern example: resisting peer pressure. Imagine you're at a gathering and the group is encouraging you to do something that doesn't align with your values. Maybe it's something small, like laughing at a joke that doesn't sit right with you, or something bigger, like compromising your principles to fit in. The Stoic approach stands firm, not out of stubbornness but out of respect for yourself. When you act in alignment with your true nature, you're not just being honest, you're building a life that feels genuinely yours. So here's a question to reflect on. What masks do you wear to gain approval, and what would happen if you took them off? What might you discover about yourself if you stopped living for the applause of others and started living for the quiet satisfaction of being true to who you are? The Stoics remind us that the most rewarding approval we can ever seek is our own, and that's a freedom worth striving for. What if you lived as though today were your last day? This question lies at the heart of the Stoic practice of Memento Mori, a Latin phrase meaning "remember you must die." It might sound morbid at first, but this practice isn't about dwelling on death. Instead, it's a powerful tool to help us focus on what truly matters, stripping away the distractions of ego, status, and the endless pursuit of validation. When we remind ourselves that our time is limited, the opinions of others suddenly lose their grip on us. Why waste precious moments chasing approval when there's so much more to life? Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, put it this way: "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Think about that for a moment. Life isn't short, it's just that we often spend it chasing things that don't truly fulfill us. Memento Mori isn't about fear, it's about clarity. By reflecting on our mortality, we gain a sharper perspective. We start to realize that the things we thought were so important, like impressing others or seeking validation, are often just noise. Here's a practical exercise to bring this idea to life. Write a letter to your future self. Imagine it's the last day of your life and you're looking back on the choices you've made. What would you want to say? What would you regret? What would you celebrate? This exercise isn't meant to be depressing. It's designed to help you align your actions with your deepest values. When you write that letter, you'll likely find that the things you truly care about have little to do with what others think of you. Now take a moment to reflect. How would your priorities shift if you stopped seeking validation? Would you spend less time curating your social media image or worrying about fitting in? Would you focus more on meaningful relationships, personal growth, or contributing something valuable to the world? Memento Mori reminds us that life is fleeting, but it's also rich with possibility if we choose to live authentically, free from the need for external approval. What if you could release your grip on outcomes? Imagine the freedom of not tying your self-worth to whether something succeeds or fails. This is the essence of the Stoic art of letting go. For the Stoics, true peace comes from focusing on what's within your control, your effort, your attitude, your choices, and releasing attachment to the results, which are often outside your hands. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it simply: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. In other words, do your part, but don't let the outcome define you. Think about a modern scenario. You've poured your heart into a project at work or school, but despite your best efforts, it doesn't go as planned. The Stoic approach isn't to shrug it off as if it doesn't matter, but to recognize that your effort was the part you controlled. The rest, whether it was praised, criticized, or ignored, isn't yours to hold on to. By detaching from the outcome, you free yourself from the need for validation. You did what you could, and that's enough. Consider how often we cling to specific results, whether it's wanting praise for a job well done, approval from others, or even a particular life milestone. The more we fixate on these outcomes, the more we set ourselves up for frustration and disappointment. The Stoics remind us that life is unpredictable, and trying to control the uncontrollable only leads to suffering. Instead, they teach us to focus on the process, on doing what's right and honorable, regardless of how it's received. So, what outcomes are you overly attached to? Is it a promotion, a relationship, or even social media likes? Take a moment to reflect. What would it feel like to put in your best effort and then let go of the rest? By practicing this kind of non-attachment, you're not giving up. You're reclaiming your peace and self-worth. You're choosing to live by your own standards, not by the ever-changing opinions of others. What if criticism didn't hurt you but helped you? This is exactly how Stoics approach it, not as a threat to their self-worth, but as an opportunity for growth. For them, criticism isn't something to fear or avoid. It's a tool, a mirror that reflects areas where you can improve. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, when someone criticizes you, the most powerful response isn't defensiveness or anger, it's to rise above and use their words to better yourself. Imagine this: you've just received negative feedback on a project at work. Your first instinct might be to feel attacked, to defend your efforts, or even to dismiss the critic as unfair. But what if instead you paused and asked yourself, what can I learn from this? This shift in perspective is at the heart of Stoicism. Criticism, no matter how harsh, is just information. It's up to you to decide whether it's useful or not. If it is, great, you've just found a way to grow. If it's not, you can let it go without letting it shake your confidence. Think about how much energy we often waste trying to prove ourselves right or seeking validation from others. Stoics would argue that this energy is better spent on self-improvement. When someone points out a flaw or a mistake, they're giving you a chance to see something you might have missed. Even if the criticism feels unjust, there's still value in reflecting on why it stung. Is there a kernel of truth in it, or does it reveal a deeper insecurity you need to address? So, how can you use criticism to improve yourself? Start by practicing detachment. Instead of reacting emotionally, take a step back and evaluate the feedback objectively. Ask yourself, does this align with my values? Does it help me move closer to who I want to be? If the answer is yes, then you've just turned a potential setback into a stepping stone. And if the answer is no, you've saved yourself the trouble of internalizing something that doesn't serve you. Either way, you win. That's the Stoic approach, turning every challenge, even criticism, into an opportunity for growth. What if your peace of mind was your ultimate goal? For the Stoics, this wasn't just a hypothetical question, it was the foundation of their philosophy. Inner peace, they believed, is far more valuable than any external validation or approval. Why? Because while the opinions of others are fleeting and often outside your control, your inner tranquility is something you can cultivate and hold onto, no matter what happens around you. Seneca once wrote, "The mind that is untroubled and tranquil has the power to live in every scene of life." Imagine that for a moment, a mind so steady, so unshaken by the chaos of the world, that it can find contentment in any circumstance. That's the kind of peace the Stoics sought, and it wasn't just about avoiding conflict or stress. It was about creating a sanctuary within yourself, a place where no one else's opinion could disturb your equilibrium. Think about how this applies in our modern world. Imagine scrolling through social media, seeing everyone's carefully curated lives, and feeling that pull to measure up, to seek likes and comments as a form of validation. But what if, instead of chasing that fleeting approval, you chose solitude? What if you decided to log off, take a walk, or simply sit in silence, prioritizing your own mental clarity over the noise of the crowd? That's a Stoic choice. It's not easy, but it's deeply rewarding. The Stoics understood that seeking external validation is like chasing a moving target. It's exhausting and ultimately unfulfilling. But inner peace, that's something you can carry with you no matter where life takes you. So here's a question to reflect on. What sacrifices are you willing to make for your own inner peace? Are you ready to let go of the need for approval, even if it means stepping away from the crowd? Because in the end, the quiet strength of a calm mind is worth far more than any applause. What if you stopped chasing approval and started appreciating what you already have? This is where Stoicism introduces a powerful tool: gratitude. For the Stoics, gratitude isn't just a fleeting feeling, it's a deliberate practice that shifts your focus from what you lack to what you already possess. It's about recognizing the abundance in your life, even when it feels like something is missing. And here's the thing, gratitude doesn't just make you feel better, it reduces your need for external validation. When you're focused on appreciating what you have, you're less likely to seek approval from others to fill a void. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." These words remind us that life itself is a gift, and when we take a moment to appreciate it, we start to see how much we already have. This mindset doesn't just diminish the desire for validation, it replaces it with a sense of contentment and self-sufficiency. It's a subtle but profound shift. So how can you put this into practice? One simple exercise is keeping a gratitude journal. Every evening, write down 3 things you're grateful for. They don't have to be grand or extraordinary. Sometimes it's the small, everyday things that matter most. Maybe it's the warmth of sunlight on your face, a kind word from a friend, or even the quiet moments you have to yourself. The act of writing them down forces you to pause and reflect, anchoring your mind in the present rather than chasing after what you think you need. Here's a question to reflect on. What are you grateful for that doesn't depend on others' approval? This is where the real power of gratitude lies. It's not about what others think of you or whether they acknowledge your efforts. It's about recognizing the intrinsic value in your life, independent of external validation. When you cultivate this mindset, you begin to realize that your worth isn't tied to what others say or do. It's rooted in the simple, unshakable fact that you are enough just as you are. And that's a truth no one can take away from you. What if you embraced everything that happens to you, every twist, every challenge, every unexpected turn? This is the essence of amor fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. For the Stoics, this isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a way of living. It's about finding peace not by controlling what happens to you, but by fully accepting it. When you love your fate, you stop needing others to validate your choices or circumstances. Instead, you find strength in the belief that everything that happens is an opportunity to grow. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic thinkers, put it this way: do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens, then you will be happy. In other words, happiness comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting what you get. This mindset shifts your focus from chasing external approval to cultivating inner resilience. Think about a modern example: failing at something important like a job interview or a creative project. For most people, failure feels like a blow to their self-worth, something to be avoided at all costs. But what if you saw that failure as a necessary step, a lesson in disguise? What if, instead of resisting it, you embraced it as part of your journey? That's amor fati in action. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about finding meaning even in the imperfections. So how can you start practicing amor fati in your daily life? Begin by noticing when you resist what's happening, when you feel frustrated, disappointed, or even angry. Instead of fighting those emotions, pause and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can this moment, however difficult, shape me into someone stronger, wiser, or more compassionate? By shifting your perspective, you'll find that the need for external validation fades, replaced by a deep sense of trust in your own path. What if success wasn't about what others think of you? What if it had nothing to do with the applause of the crowd, the number of followers you have, or the size of your bank account? For the Stoics, success was never about external validation. It was about something far deeper, far more personal, something entirely within your control. They believed that true success is measured by your own standards, by the alignment of your actions with your principles, and by the peace of mind that comes from living a virtuous life. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient. In other words, success isn't found in chasing after what you don't have. It's found in appreciating what you already possess: your character, your effort, and your ability to live in harmony with your values. Think about it this way: imagine setting a personal goal, like learning a new skill or improving your health. The Stoic approach wouldn't focus on the outcome, whether you become the best or achieve recognition. Instead, it would focus on the process itself. Did you show up consistently? Did you give your best effort? Did you stay true to your values along the way? If the answer is yes, then by Stoic standards, you've already succeeded. The external results, whether you win or lose, whether others notice or not, are irrelevant. What matters is the internal victory of knowing you acted with integrity and purpose. So, how do you define success for yourself? Is it tied to what others see and say, or is it rooted in something deeper, something no one can take away from you? The Stoics challenge us to shift our perspective, to stop measuring ourselves by external benchmarks and start looking inward. Success, after all, isn't something you chase. It's something you build day by day through the choices you make and the principles you live by. And when you embrace this mindset, you'll find that the need for validation fades away. Because the only approval you'll ever need is your own. What if you prepared for the worst and found peace in it? This is the essence of the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It's not about pessimism or dwelling on negativity. It's about mentally rehearsing potential challenges so you're not caught off guard by life's inevitable setbacks. For Stoics, this practice is a powerful tool to reduce the fear of rejection and criticism, two things that often drive us to seek validation from others. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's most famous practitioners, once wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" At first glance, this might sound harsh, but it's actually liberating. By anticipating these challenges, you strip them of their power to shock or upset you. When you prepare for the possibility of rejection, it no longer feels like a personal failure. Instead, it becomes just another part of the human experience, something you've already accounted for in your mind. Let's bring this into a modern context. Imagine you're about to have a difficult conversation with your boss, a friend, or a partner. Instead of dreading the worst-case scenario, you take a few moments to visualize how it might unfold. You think through how you'll respond if the conversation doesn't go as planned. You remind yourself that their reaction isn't within your control, but your composure is. By mentally preparing for the possibility of rejection or criticism, you approach the situation with calm confidence rather than anxiety. This practice doesn't just help you handle tough moments, it also helps you let go of the need for external validation. When you've already accepted that not everyone will approve of you or your actions, you stop seeking their approval in the first place. You begin to act from a place of inner clarity, not from a fear of judgment. So, how can anticipating challenges help you let go of validation seeking? When you realize that rejection and criticism are part of life, they lose their sting. You start to see that your worth isn't tied to how others perceive you. Instead, it's rooted in how you choose to show up regardless of the outcome. And that, in itself, is a form of freedom. What if you used social media without seeking approval? Imagine scrolling through your feed not to count likes or compare your life to others, but simply to engage, learn, or share. This is the Stoic approach. In a world where social media thrives on validation, the Stoics remind us that true worth comes from within, not from the fleeting approval of others. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And isn't that what social media does to us? It magnifies our fears, our insecurities, and our longing for external validation, pulling us further away from the inner peace we seek. The Stoics understood that distractions, whether they come from the noise of ancient Rome or the endless scroll of modern platforms, can derail us from living a meaningful life. They teach us to focus on what we can control, our intentions, our actions, and how we respond to the world around us. Social media, with its constant barrage of curated perfection, often makes us forget this. It tricks us into believing that our value is tied to how others perceive us, but Stoicism challenges this mindset. It asks us to step back and ask ourselves, does this post, this comment, or this like truly reflect who I am? Or am I just chasing validation? So how can we apply Stoic principles to our use of social media? Start by setting boundaries. Limit your screen time, not as a punishment, but as a way to reclaim your focus and energy. When you do engage, do it with intention. Share because you have something meaningful to say, not because you crave attention. And most importantly, remind yourself daily that your worth isn't measured by likes or followers. It's measured by the strength of your character and the integrity of your actions. Now take a moment to reflect. How does social media influence your need for validation? Does it pull you away from your values, or can it be a tool for connection without compromising your sense of self? The Stoics would argue that it's not about abandoning these platforms altogether, but about using them with wisdom and self-awareness. After all, the goal isn't to reject the modern world, it's to navigate it with clarity and purpose. What if you lived a simpler life, free from the need for approval? This is a question the Stoics would ask us to consider deeply. At the heart of Stoic philosophy is the idea that simplicity isn't just about having fewer possessions, it's about freeing ourselves from the clutter of external expectations. When we strip away the unnecessary, we're left with what truly matters: our values, our character, and our ability to live with integrity. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it this way: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This isn't just about money or material things. It's about recognizing that the more we depend on external validation, whether it's likes, compliments, or the approval of others, the more we chain ourselves to things we can't control. Simplicity, in this sense, becomes a form of liberation. Think about it in modern terms. How often do we clutter our lives, both physically and mentally, with things that don't serve us? Social media, for instance, can become a constant chase for validation. We post, we wait, we measure our worth by the response. But what if we stepped back? What if we decluttered not just our homes but our minds? Removing the excess gives us space to focus on what's truly meaningful: our growth, our relationships, and our inner peace. Imagine someone who decides to simplify their life. They clear out their closet, not because they're giving up on style, but because they no longer need a wardrobe to impress others. They step away from social media not out of frustration, but to reclaim their time and attention. They stop saying yes to every request, not out of selfishness, but to protect their energy for what truly aligns with their values. This is Stoic simplicity in action, not deprivation, but clarity. So, what can you simplify right now to reduce your need for validation? Is it a habit, a relationship, or even a mindset that's weighing you down? Take a moment to reflect. What's one thing you could let go of today to create more space for what truly matters? What if you could stay present in the moment, free from the need for approval? This is where the Stoic practice of mindfulness comes into play. For the Stoics, mindfulness wasn't just about calming the mind. It was a tool to stay grounded, to remain detached from the noise of external validation, and to focus on what truly matters, the here and now. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that our thoughts and attention are within our control, even when the world around us feels chaotic or demanding. So, how do Stoics use mindfulness to avoid distractions? It starts with training the mind to stay present. Instead of getting caught up in what others think or chasing after fleeting approval, Stoics practice observing their thoughts without judgment. They ask themselves, is this thought serving me, or is it pulling me away from my purpose? By doing this, they create a mental space where they can act with clarity and intention, rather than being swept away by the need for validation. Here's a practical exercise to try: mindful breathing. Take a moment to sit quietly and focus on your breath. Notice the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. If your mind starts to wander, to worries about what others think or desires for recognition, gently bring your attention back to your breath. This simple act of refocusing trains your mind to stay anchored in the present moment, helping you detach from the pull of external approval. Now think about this: how can mindfulness help you let go of validation seeking? When you're fully present, you're less likely to be swayed by the opinions of others. You begin to see that your worth isn't tied to what people think of you. It's rooted in your own actions and character. Mindfulness, in this way, becomes a shield against the distractions of ego and a path to inner freedom. It's not about ignoring the world. It's about engaging with it from a place of calm and self-assurance rather than fear or insecurity. What if your relationships weren't about seeking approval? Imagine a connection built not on the need for validation but on mutual respect, trust, and shared growth. This is the Stoic approach to relationships, a perspective that removes the weight of dependency and replaces it with genuine, balanced connections. The Stoics believed that relationships should be rooted in virtue and mutual understanding, not in the pursuit of external validation. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures." What he meant was that true friendship should uplift both individuals, not create dependency or emotional strain. A healthy relationship, in the Stoic view, is one where both people grow together, not because they need each other's approval, but because they respect and support each other's journey toward becoming better versions of themselves. Take a modern example: setting boundaries. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with the pressure to be liked or accepted, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable. But Stoicism teaches us that protecting our peace and staying true to our values is far more important than seeking approval. Imagine saying no to a social event because it doesn't align with your priorities, or ending a toxic relationship because it no longer serves your growth. These actions might feel challenging, but they're rooted in self-respect, and they create space for healthier, more authentic connections. So, how can you build healthier relationships without seeking validation? Start by asking yourself what you truly value in a relationship. Is it mutual respect, shared goals, emotional support? Once you identify those values, focus on nurturing connections that align with them, rather than chasing after approval or trying to fit into someone else's expectations. Remember, the most meaningful relationships are those where both people can stand on their own, yet choose to walk together. What if writing could free you from the need for approval? For the Stoics, journaling wasn't just a habit, it was a tool for clarity, self-awareness, and inner strength. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, kept a personal journal which we now know as Meditations. In it he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This simple act of writing allowed him to examine his thoughts, align his actions with his values, and detach from the opinions of others. Journaling, for the Stoics, was a way to confront themselves honestly. It's a practice that forces you to slow down, to question your impulses, and to ask, why do I feel the need for validation? When you put pen to paper, you're not just recording events, you're uncovering patterns. You start to see how often you seek approval, how frequently you let external opinions shape your decisions. And in that process, you begin to reclaim control over your own life. But how do you start? Here's a practical tip. Begin with simple prompts. Each day, ask yourself, what did I do today that aligned with my values? Or where did I let the fear of judgment influence my choices? These questions aren't meant to judge you, they're meant to illuminate. Over time, you'll notice trends. Maybe you'll see that you often seek validation in certain relationships or situations. Maybe you'll realize how much energy you're wasting trying to please others. Journaling helps you spot these patterns so you can address them. The beauty of this practice is that it's private. It's just you and your thoughts, no audience, no judgment. That's why it's so powerful. It's a space where you can be completely honest with yourself. And that honesty is the first step toward letting go of the need for validation. So, what insights might journaling reveal about your own life? What could you learn if you took a few moments each day to reflect, to question, and to grow? The answers might just surprise you and change the way you see yourself. What if your ambitions weren't tied to others' opinions? This is the heart of the Stoic approach to ambition. While many of us chase goals to prove something to the world or seek approval from others, the Stoics take a radically different path. For them, ambition isn't about external validation. It's about personal growth, self-mastery, and living in alignment with your deepest values. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. This simple yet profound idea reminds us that our ambitions should flow from who we aspire to be, not what others expect of us. It's about purposeful action rooted in self-awareness and integrity. When we focus on becoming the best version of ourselves, external opinions lose their grip on us. We're no longer chasing applause or approval. We're building a life of meaning and fulfillment. Take a modern example. Imagine someone starting a passion project like writing a novel or launching a small business. A Stoic wouldn't measure their success by how many people praise their work or how much money they make. Instead, they'd focus on the process, how the project helps them grow, challenges their creativity, and aligns with their values. The joy comes from the act of creating, not the external rewards. This shift in perspective transforms ambition from a source of stress into a source of inner peace. So, how can you align your ambitions with your values? Start by asking yourself, what truly matters to me? What kind of person do I want to become? When your goals are tied to these deeper questions, you'll find that your ambitions become less about proving yourself to others and more about living a life that feels authentic and fulfilling. And isn't that what we're all striving for? What if failure didn't define you? For the Stoics, failure wasn't something to fear or be ashamed of. It was a teacher, a guide, and even an opportunity. While many of us instinctively tie our self-worth to success, the Stoics saw failure as a natural part of life, one that could reveal deeper truths about ourselves and the world around us. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that adversity and failure aren't barriers to growth. They're the very tools that shape us into stronger, wiser individuals. Imagine this: you've spent months preparing for a big presentation at work. You've practiced endlessly, but when the moment comes, you stumble. Your nerves get the better of you, and you walk away feeling defeated. The Stoic approach here isn't to dwell on the embarrassment or seek reassurance from others. Instead, it's to ask, what can I learn from this? Maybe you discover that you need to work on managing stress, or perhaps you realize that you've been placing too much of your identity in external validation. Either way, the failure becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. This mindset shift isn't just about resilience, it's about freedom. When you stop seeing failure as a reflection of your worth, you're no longer trapped by the opinions of others. You're free to take risks, to experiment, and to grow. And here's the thing, this isn't just ancient wisdom. Think about some of the most successful people in history: scientists, artists, entrepreneurs. Many of them didn't achieve greatness by avoiding failure. They embraced it as part of the process. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's the Stoic spirit in action. So how can you start reframing failure in your own life? Begin by asking yourself, what can this teach me? Instead of running from disappointment or seeking validation from others to ease the sting, sit with the experience. Reflect on it. What went wrong? What could you do differently next time? And most importantly, how can you detach your sense of self-worth from the outcome? This doesn't mean you won't feel the sting of failure. Stoics aren't robots after all. But it does mean you'll start seeing failure as a valuable part of your journey, not something to be feared or avoided. Failure, in the Stoic view, isn't the enemy. It's the mirror that shows us where we need to grow. And when you stop chasing validation from others to define your worth, you'll find that failure loses its power over you. Instead, it becomes a quiet teacher guiding you toward a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. What if you sought discomfort to build resilience? This might sound counterintuitive, but it's a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that by intentionally putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations, we can train our minds to become less dependent on external validation and more grounded in our own inner strength. Think of it as a mental workout, just as lifting weights strengthens your muscles, enduring discomfort strengthens your character. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This idea is at the heart of voluntary discomfort. By willingly facing challenges, whether it's skipping a meal, taking a cold shower, or waking up earlier than usual, we remind ourselves that we don't need external comforts or approval to feel secure. Instead, we learn to rely on our own resilience and adaptability. Take fasting, for example. It's not just about abstaining from food. It's about proving to yourself that you can endure temporary discomfort and still function. Or consider cold showers, a practice many Stoics embrace. That initial shock of cold water isn't just a test of physical endurance. It's a reminder that you can handle discomfort without seeking immediate relief or reassurance from others. These small acts of discipline build a foundation of self-trust, making you less vulnerable to the opinions and judgments of those around you. So, how can voluntary discomfort help you let go of validation seeking? When you willingly step into discomfort, you're sending a powerful message to yourself. I don't need others to validate my worth. I am enough as I am. Over time, this practice chips away at the need for external approval, replacing it with a quiet confidence that comes from within. What small act of discomfort could you embrace today to start building that resilience? What if you stopped comparing yourself to others? For the Stoics, this wasn't just a hypothetical question, it was a way of life. They understood that comparison is the thief of peace, a habit that fuels the endless chase for validation. When we measure ourselves against others, we're no longer focusing on our own growth or values. Instead, we're handing over our sense of self-worth to external factors, which, as the Stoics believed, is a recipe for dissatisfaction. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it bluntly: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, stay true to yourself, even if it means standing apart from the crowd. The Stoics didn't care about outshining others or winning approval. Their focus was inward, on their own progress, their own virtues, and their own journey. They knew that chasing validation through comparison is like running on a treadmill. You're moving, but you're not going anywhere meaningful. So, how can we apply this Stoic wisdom in our own lives? Start by identifying the triggers that pull you into the comparison trap. Maybe it's scrolling through social media, where everyone's highlight reel seems to outshine your reality. Or perhaps it's the constant chatter of coworkers comparing salaries, promotions, or achievements. Whatever the source, the Stoic approach is simple: limit your exposure. You don't have to cut these things out entirely, but be mindful of how they affect your mindset. Ask yourself, is this helping me grow, or is it just feeding my need for validation? Take a moment to reflect. How does comparison show up in your life? Does it make you feel more energized and focused, or does it leave you anxious and inadequate? The Stoics would argue that the only person you should compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. That's where true progress lies, not in outdoing others, but in becoming the best version of yourself. By shifting your focus inward, you reclaim your power. You stop letting others define your worth and start building it on your own terms. And isn't that the ultimate freedom? To live authentically without the weight of comparison dragging you down. The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they lived it, and with a little practice, so can you. What if happiness wasn't dependent on others' approval? The Stoics believed that true joy comes from within, not from the validation or admiration of others. They taught that external circumstances, whether praise, success, or material wealth, are fleeting and unreliable. Instead, happiness is rooted in our ability to cultivate inner peace and self-sufficiency. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, put it simply: True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. This means finding contentment in who you are and what you have, rather than constantly seeking approval or chasing after what you lack. Take a moment to consider how this applies to modern life. Imagine someone who finds joy in something as simple as a quiet morning with a cup of coffee, or the satisfaction of completing a personal project. These moments aren't tied to anyone else's opinion. They're deeply personal and self-sustaining. The Stoics would argue that this is the essence of happiness, the ability to derive fulfillment from your own actions and mindset, regardless of external validation. But how do we get there? It starts with shifting our focus inward. Instead of measuring our worth by how others see us, we can practice gratitude for what we already possess. We can learn to appreciate the small, everyday moments that often go unnoticed. And most importantly, we can train ourselves to detach from the need for constant approval, recognizing that our value isn't determined by anyone else's standards. So here's a question to reflect on. What truly makes you happy, independent of others' opinions? Is it a hobby, a quiet moment of reflection, or the satisfaction of personal growth? By identifying these sources of inner joy, we can begin to build a life that isn't swayed by the ever-changing tides of external validation. This is the Stoic path to happiness, a journey inward where the only approval that matters is your own. What if your highest goal was to live virtuously? For the Stoics, this wasn't just a lofty ideal, it was the very foundation of a meaningful life. Unlike the fleeting satisfaction of external validation, virtue represents something unchanging, something deeply aligned with who you are at your core. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." In this simple yet profound statement, he reminds us that virtue isn't about proving yourself to others, it's about embodying moral integrity in every action, every decision, every moment. Think about it. How often do we chase after recognition or approval, only to find that it leaves us feeling empty? The Stoics saw this pursuit as a distraction from what truly matters. Instead of asking, "What will people think of me?" they asked, "What kind of person do I want to be?" It's a subtle shift, but one that changes everything. When you prioritize virtue, you're no longer beholden to the opinions of others. Your compass becomes your own inner sense of right and wrong. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're faced with a difficult decision at work, a choice that could either benefit you personally or uphold a principle you believe in. The Stoic approach wouldn't focus on how others might praise or judge your decision. Instead, it would ask you to consider what aligns with your values. What action reflects courage, justice, wisdom, or self-discipline? These are the virtues that guide a Stoic life, and they become the measure of your character, not the applause or criticism of others. So, how can you align your actions with your values in your own life? Start by reflecting on what truly matters to you. What principles do you hold sacred? And then, in moments big and small, ask yourself, am I acting in a way that honors these principles? It's not about perfection, it's about intention. Every choice you make is an opportunity to live more virtuously, to build a life that feels authentic and meaningful, regardless of who's watching. This is the Stoic path, a life where virtue isn't just an abstract idea, but a daily practice. It's about choosing to be the best version of yourself, not for the sake of others, but because it's who you are. And when you live this way, something remarkable happens. You stop needing validation because you found something far more powerful: inner alignment with your deepest values. So, what does it all come down to? At its core, the Stoic approach to validation is about reclaiming your inner freedom. It's not about rejecting praise or criticism outright. It's about not letting them define you. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what's within our control, our thoughts, actions, and reactions. When you detach from the opinions of others and cultivate self-awareness, you build a resilience that no external validation can shake. As Seneca once said, "The man who is not disturbed by the absence of applause is free." That's the kind of freedom we're talking about, a freedom rooted in self-mastery, not in the fleeting approval of others. Think about it. How often do you find yourself seeking validation, whether it's through likes on social media, compliments at work, or approval from friends and family? What if, instead of chasing after that external validation, you turned inward and asked yourself, am I living in alignment with my values? Am I being true to myself? These are the questions that lead to real growth. They help you break free from the cycle of seeking approval and instead focus on becoming the best version of yourself. Now it's your turn to take these principles and apply them. Start small. The next time you feel the urge to seek validation, pause, reflect, ask yourself why it matters so much and whether it aligns with what truly matters to you. Over time, this practice will help you build the kind of inner strength that Stoics like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus championed. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you plan to apply Stoic principles to break free from validation seeking? Share your ideas in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you're ready to dive deeper into Stoic wisdom, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Remember, the journey to inner freedom begins with a single step. Take that step to